Hey folks, my name is Mo Amir and this is VANCOLOUR, British Columbia's bona fide culture and politics TV talk show. We got a jam-packed show tonight, including a Grand Prix world champion of magic, based right here in BC. But first, over the last 4 to 5 years, I've had a lot of friends move out of BC. In fact, nearly 70,000 people left BC last year, with more than half relocating just next door to Alberta. So what's going on? Am I going to lose more friends? Here to comfort me or be the bearer of bad news is a real estate agent, analyst, commentator, and advisor to policymakers. His business is among the top 1% of Greater Vancouver realtors, and his weekly newsletter reaches several thousand readers. The founder of the Saretsky Group, he is Steve Saretsky.
Thanks for having me on.
Steve, so nice to see you. Why are all my friends leaving the province? What's going on?
Maybe they're trying to get away from you. I don't know.
I wouldn't blame them, to be honest.
I think it's cost of living. I think it's just continues to kind of ratchet up. I mean, truthfully, I'm kind of surprised it took as long as it did.
Really?
I think I've been involved in Calgary real estate myself, just on the personal side, and that was kind of one of my core theses, 4 or 5 years ago, was if Vancouver continues to run at the pace that everybody believes it's going to, which is basically double-digit price appreciation, eventually people will leave, and I think we're finally starting to see that in the data, and it's not just Vancouver. If you look at there's a good chart out recently from BMO on the research side, which showed Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal seeing a mass exodus interprovincially, basically leaving those provinces and going to more affordable places.
There almost seems to be like a nesting doll effect, though, right? Like people are leaving big cities, or in the case of BC, people are leaving BC and going somewhere else. And then I've also seen that there's a lot of migration out of Canada, right? Like this is a trend on multi levels.
Yeah, I think it's just reaching sort of a tipping point, right? It's like, I think what people do in Vancouver is they get sort of priced out. They go to the island or they go to Kelowna. Those two areas have gotten really expensive. So now I'm finding that it's starting to migrate to Calgary. Like I never had those conversations 3 or 4 years, 5 years ago with clients, prospects. Now it's all, hey, tell me a bit more about Calgary. And so, and we've had a bunch of our clients personally relocate.
Yeah.
So, you're starting to see it. Again, a lot of this is anecdotal, but you can see it in some of the data as well. It is happening.
When we think of who is moving out of province, out of BC in particular, aside from being my friends, who else is moving out in terms of demographics?
I mean, it tends to obviously be, millennials, people that are trying to start families, right? And I think if you look at Vancouver, you always talk about, the missing middle. I mean, it is true. We do have that missing middle housing, right? It's either you're in a 2-bedroom condo for, let's call it $1 million, or you're going into a single family house at 2.
Right.
There is no sort of in between, duplex, triplex, townhouse. I mean, we're starting to slowly build that, but
so this is hitting millennials the hardest.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you think about a millennial that's, is trying to get started in life and wants to start a family. I mean, it's tough. It's tough to do in this city. And I think you're certainly seeing fewer people having kids. But if you do want to have kids and, you grew up with the yard and you want to, offer that experience to your children, I mean, it's tough to do that in Vancouver.
So is that what you're hearing from clients, that, they're maybe willing to even sacrifice their careers here or their network that they've built up, their friendship with me perhaps, in order to have a lifestyle that is more family orientated? Yeah.
And I think people are just moving further and further out, right? And I think we saw that during the pandemic. And I feel like that trend hasn't really reversed. Like we're still seeing like a hybrid model from a work from home perspective. And we're still seeing a lot of people moving out to Langley, to Abbotsford, to Surrey, to have more space. If you only have to commute 2-3 times a week, all of a sudden that commute isn't that bad. And so, we saw a little bit of a price correction, but you still see a lot of young people are moving out there, and it's out of necessity.
Within Canada, are there better job opportunities than what you can find in Metro Vancouver or British Columbia? Like, are people actually leaving for economic reasons as well?
I mean, I think if you look at statistically, the highest incomes are in Alberta.
Oh, really? Okay.
Which is
the cost of living is cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, like I said, I'm surprised it took as long as it did.
Wow.
Lower taxes, higher incomes, cheaper housing. Again, you're dealing with the weather. So there's obviously a lot of people, I'd call them maybe a little bit snobby at times, but people spend we've had stories with clients that have relocated back where it's like, hey, we spent 2 years in Calgary, couldn't deal with the weather, we moved back, and we're gonna stomach these very high housing prices and just deal with it, because that's the lifestyle that we want to have.
Right.
So everybody kind of moves for different reasons, but I would just say in general, we are certainly seeing, I think more people are just dealing with cost of living and saying, how am I ever going to get ahead? And whether that's relocating to Alberta or different parts of Canada or even the US, I think it has kind of reached that tipping point.
When I think about all the issues that we face here in British Columbia in particular, does it all boil down to the cost of land? Like, I'm thinking if you're an entrepreneur and you want to start, especially a storefront business or something that requires some industrial land, there's a heavy cost not only purchasing that land, but even if you want to lease it, getting into the market right now. I think about, this idea of building communities and building schools or even building social housing. Like, the cost of land seems to just be this anchor that really prevents growth from happening. Do you feel the same way, or is there something else that I'm missing here?
I think that's very accurate. I mean, I always tell people, like, listen, if I think the cost of construction is also up there now too, especially in Vancouver. I always say, like, okay, listen, let's just pretend I'll give you a piece of dirt in East Vancouver. I'll give it to you for free. So normally that's $2 million. Yeah, very prohibitive. But I'll give you the dirt for free. All you have to do is go and build a house. I mean, for you to build that house, it's going to cost you minimum $1 million.
Really?
So, like,
can I sell that house for $4 million though?
You can probably get at least 3.5 for it. So. But that, I mean, so I think it's and I think ultimately though, why is the cost of construction so expensive? It does come back to house prices, right? People need incomes to support the cost of living here,
right?
And so, like, if your trade is coming in from Abbotsford and driving in, and their rent has gone up by 30% over the last 2 years, or their mortgage has gone up, and it's all gets filtered through at the end of the day. It's amazing because I've personally have built properties in Calgary, and the cost of construction is materially cheaper there.
Interesting.
And you're like, well, why is that the case?
So why is it?
I mean, I think for whatever reason, the trades seem to charge a little bit less. I find maybe the materials seem to be slightly cheaper. I think there's less taxation on those. It's very strange. Honestly, I don't really have a perfect answer for you, other than there's like a noticeable difference in the cost of construction.
And I'll end it on this note. If there was a severe correction in the cost of land, it might put our whole financial system at risk, right? So we're kind of caught.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and I look at like governments, and I think every government today, whether you're at the municipal, provincial, federal level, they're all looking for revenues. Yeah. And I think that real estate has been that golden goose that has brought on those revenues through capital gains increases, through property transfer taxes, through development charges. So real estate, it's tough because you're kind of walking that fine line of trying to keep the system going. But at the same time, knowing the system is kind of crumbling a little bit under us to the point where now we are seeing people leaving.
Yeah, mostly my friends.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the only one left pretty soon.
It's just you and me, bud. Yeah. Steve, thank you so much. I appreciate your time
tonight.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Folks, follow him on social media. He's a wealth of knowledge and analysis. He is, of course, real estate aficionado Steve Saretsky. Now, one of the world's best magicians is here in studio. He fooled Penn and Teller twice, so he might make my head explode. Sean Farquhar is up next.